After the demise of Roman Emperor Constantine the Great in 337, the Roman Empire faced a series of struggles regarding the succession of power. In 364, a skilled general named Valentian ascended to the position of emperor. As a strategic move, Valentian appointed his brother Valens as co-emperor and dispatched him to Constantinople to address the Persian situation, while Valentian focused on fortifying the Danubian defences against the barbarians. Valentian's reign came to an end in 375, and he was succeeded by his 16-year-old son Gratian. However, Gratian's youth and lack of experience made it challenging for him to handle the influx of Goths into the Balkans. These Gothic tribes had emerged on the Roman Empire's lower Danube frontier a year earlier. The Goths originated from eastern Germany and migrated to the Black Sea region during the late 2nd century AD. Their raids on the Roman Empire intensified during that century, and for nearly 25 years, the Goths wreaked havoc both on land and at sea, instilling fear throughout the empire. The westward migration of the Huns from China resulted in the displacement of various peoples. Following their defeat by the Huns, the Goths experienced significant unrest among their sub-tribes. Some sub-tribes became subjects of the Huns, while others embarked on a westward journey. The Visigoths, specifically the powerful Tervingi led by Fritigern and Alavivus, faced internal factions that were opposed to Roman authority and Christianity. These factions moved towards the Carpathians. However, the majority of the Visigoths sought refuge within the Roman Empire and made their way towards the Danube border, arriving in 376. Upon reaching Byzantine territory, the Visigoths requested permission to settle there. This sudden influx of over 50,000 Goths created an urgent need for food and land, presenting a challenge to the Roman Empire. The matter required the personal attention of the Eastern Emperor Valens, who had been engaged in a campaign against the Persians with the majority of the army. Eventually, Valens granted permission for settlement, as long as the Visigoths surrendered their weapons to Byzantine authorities and provide all males under military age as hostages. However, the Goths refused and instead crossed the Danube. They established a camp on the southern bank near Durastora, where they endured a harsh winter. Valens entrusted the task of disarming the Visigoths to his generals, Lupicinus and Maximus. However, these generals succumbed to corruption and accepting bribes. They allowed the Visigoths to retain their weapons. Meanwhile, the Ostrogoths arrived at the Danube seeking sanctuary, but their request was denied. With the Danube defences now weakened due to the absence of troops, the Ostrogoths found an opportunity and crossed the river following the path of the Tervingi. As unrest grew among the Visigoths, who were determined to hold on to their weapons, Lupicinus gathered the Roman Danube garrisons and guided the entire tribe to his headquarters in Marcianople, where they could be closely monitored. In Marcianople, Lupicinus arranged a dinner conference with Fritigern and Alavivus. However, he had ulterior motives and had his honor guard, including Alavivus, and himself arrested by the Romans. Fritigern managed to escape, possibly through a skirmish or deception, but Alavivus's fate remains unknown. Fritigern, feeling pushed to the limit by Lupicinus and Maximus, joined forces with the Ostrogoths. Upon reuniting with his people, Fritigern wasted no time and led them in looting the surrounding countryside. In response, Lupicinus rallied his troops and confronted the Goths just 9 miles outside of Marcianople. Despite the Romans' efforts, they were unable to withstand the relentless onslaught of the Goths. The combined forces of the Visigoths and their newfound allies conducted raids that extended all the way to Adrianople. Outside the city, Fritigern managed to gather additional supporters. In response to the growing threat, Valens negotiated a truce with the Persians and returned to Europe. In June, scouts reported the presence of a large number of barbarians near Adrianople. Valens then dispatched a considerable force to confront Fritigern, pushing the Goths into a marshy area near the mouth of the Danube. The ensuing battle ended inconclusively, with most of the Goths escaping through the marshes. Subsequently, the Goths launched raids in northern Greece, prompting Valens to pursue them by marching into Thrace. Realizing the need for reinforcements, Valens requested support from his nephew Gratian, who was in Italy at the time. However, the Goths had formed alliances with various Germanic tribes against Rome, leading to uprisings along the Rhine. Gratian had to campaign against the Germanic tribes and successfully defeated them before moving down the Danube River Valley to join his uncle. During the summer of 378, Valens' generals managed to push the Goths back in Thrace, directing them towards the city of Adrianople. As Fritigern camped nearby Adrianople, Valens prepared for the final battle. His generals recommended he only use hit-and-run tactics. However, Valens wanted to wage one great final battle, defeating the Goths once and for all. Approximately 8 miles from Adrianople, Fritigern and the Visigoths established their camp in a strategically advantageous position on elevated terrain, surrounded by a defensive circle of wagons. The Visigoths primarily comprised infantry forces, while the Ostrogoths contributed the majority of the cavalry. Although Roman scouts estimated the Gothic troops to be around 10,000, this figure was dismissed as an underestimate by Ammianus, with modern historians suggesting a strength of 12 to 15,000. The Gothic cavalry departed to gather provisions for the camp population. Driven by a combination of envy towards Gratian's successes and a desire to achieve a glorious victory before his nephew's arrival, Valens made the decision to confront the Goths. Departing from Adrianople at dawn on August 9th, Valens led his legions, leaving behind the treasury and baggage under appropriate guard. Despite facing the Gothic camp positioned atop a hill, the Roman troops, fatigued and dehydrated from a rapid march over challenging terrain in extreme heat, appeared before the Goths around 2 p.m. Both sides were unprepared for battle. Fritigern's entire cavalry, under the command of Alathius and Saphrax, were away foraging, leaving only the Gothic infantry to defend the camp. To delay and disrupt the Romans, the Goths set fire to the fields, creating a smokescreen. Negotiations were initiated for the exchange of hostages, which frustrated the Roman soldiers despite their seemingly stronger position. However, these negotiations bought valuable time for Fritigern. Valens positioned himself among a battalion of elite Palatini troops known as the Lanceari and Mattiari. He decided to take a break to allow his troops to rest and get into position. Eventually, he terminated the negotiations, and certain Roman units began the battle without receiving explicit orders. The shield archers of the imperial Scolae, led by Prince Mercurius of Iberia, launched an attack. The Goths mounted a limited counterattack, pushing the skirmishers into disarray within their own lines. Valens then gave the command for a general advance. Although the Roman infantry was not fully deployed, the cavalry was prepared. It was at this moment that Alathius and Saphrax's cavalry appeared on both flanks of the Gothic encampment. Without hesitation, the leaders of the Greuthungi unleashed their approximately 5,000 Gothic, Alan, and Hun horsemen, charging down the hillside with ferocity. Despite a valiant effort by the Roman cavalry, they were significantly outnumbered. The Gothic cavalry struck the Roman forces like a forceful thunderbolt, as described by Ammianus. The Roman right-wing cavalry, which was closing in on the Gothic camp, was completely overwhelmed and scattered by the barbarians' relentless charge. The situation was even more dire for the Roman left-wing cavalry. Having advanced too quickly, they created a dangerous gap between themselves and the Roman infantry. Exploiting this opening, the Gothic cavalry attacked the Roman horsemen from the sides and rear. The Roman cavalry suffered heavy casualties, either being driven from the battlefield or forced back towards their infantry, hewn to pieces by the enemy forces. As the Roman cavalry faltered, the Gothic cavalry swiftly attacked the flanks and rear of the still incomplete Roman infantry formation. The foot soldiers, enveloped in a cloud of dust raised by the cavalry charge, were driven back into such a tight mass that many of them were unable to draw their swords or effectively defend themselves. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Ostrogoths unleashed a barrage of arrows upon the Roman infantry. Recognizing the opportunity, Fritigern directed his own infantry to move out from behind the protective ring of wagons. With an unstoppable surge, the Gothic infantry broke free from the barricades and launched a relentless assault on the Roman legions. Equipped with long, slashing swords and battle axes, the Goths inflicted devastating casualties upon the Roman forces. The battle raged on until sunset, with the remnants of the Roman lines finally succumbing to the overwhelming pressure. Valens and his elite troops had thus far managed to hold back the enemy. As the Palatini finally gave way, the Goths broke through their lines. The majority of the Palatini soldiers, overcome by panic, fled the battlefield, leaving Valens with only his personal bodyguard. Desperate to escape, Valens made an attempt but was gravely wounded by an Arab. His entourage managed to drag him to a nearby peasant's cottage, where they sought refuge. However, the Goths, unaware that the emperor was inside, set the building on fire, resulting in the deaths of everyone inside. Thus, Valens' 14-year reign came to an end. According to reports, around 14,000 soldiers perished in the battle, including Valens and Sebastian. Regarded by one Roman historian as the most significant defeat for Rome since the Battle of Cannae, the Battle of Adrianople did not have an immediate and catastrophic impact on the Roman Empire. While the Goths engaged in plunder and devastation across the Balkans for a period of time, Gratian, along with the assistance of a new emperor in the east named Theodosius, eventually managed to push back those Goths who refused to swear loyalty to the empire, driving them back across the Danube. In 382, Theodosius made an official acknowledgement of the Germanic communities residing within Roman territory in exchange for their commitment to provide military service. The significant presence of Goths within the Roman army influenced its composition, leading to a shift towards a predominantly cavalry force within the Eastern Roman Empire. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.